I've been walking a while now, running from God only knows what. I left Texas in a hurry, faster than I've ever moved in my life, right after that public alert told everyone to shelter in place. I tried, I locked the doors, I boarded the windows, I prayed, but something I couldn't see forced its way into my home, and I've been on the road ever since. All I've got is this little solar-powered radio, whispering reports of people being torn apart, eaten alive. Every time the signal cuts out, I wonder if that scream I heard was the last voice in that town. I guess I'm lucky I ran when I did. Supplies are low, my legs are giving out. And up ahead, the sky is turning black clouds rolling like bruises, warning me that something bad is coming, something worse than the things that hunt at night. That's why I travel in daylight, because whatever these creatures are, they own the dark. What are they? Why are they here? No one knows. But I do know one thing. This nightmare I'm living, these endless miles, this fear that never sleeps, I found a path leading off the old service road, a narrow dirt trail swallowed by weeds and silence. I followed it for about a mile, praying it led somewhere. Anywhere. That's when I saw it. A small green and white house sitting alone in the clearing, like it had been waiting for me. My knees hit the ground before I even realized I'd fallen pure exhaustion, pure relief. For the first time in days, I thought, maybe I'd live through the night. I checked the place carefully, room by room, corner by corner. No people, no bodies, no blood, just dust and quiet. I hurried to the basement, barricaded the door, and finally let myself breathe. But when I searched the rest of the house, that's when the tears almost came. There was food, there was water, canned goods stacked neatly, like the family who lived here planned to come back any minute. I ate until my hands stopped shaking. I drank until the dryness in my throat finally loosened. I was getting ready for a well-deserved rest when I heard it, upstairs, soft moaning, footsteps dragging across the floorboards. I froze, held my breath, listened. The steps moved slowly, like something searching, like something that didn't need to see me to know I was there. I stayed quiet, still, praying whatever it was wouldn't find the basement door. I don't remember what happened next. My body shut down. Sleep took me like a blackout. When I woke the next morning, sunlight was leaking through the cracks in the boards. The house was silent again, too silent. I gathered my things, didn't look upstairs, didn't want to know, and I hit the road again, because out here, rest is a luxury, staying too long is a death sentence. Morning hit like a slap of cold water. The green and white house sat behind me, quiet as a grave. No footsteps, no moaning, no sign of whatever stalked the upstairs the night before. I didn't look back, didn't dare. I stepped onto the cracked asphalt, the road stretching out in front of me like a scar across the land. The sun was low, bleeding orange through the blackened clouds, and for a moment it almost felt normal. Almost. The air was too still. No birds, no insects, not even the distant hum of a car engine. Just the sound of my boots hitting the pavement and the faint rattle of the radio clipped to my pack. Every mile felt heavier than the last. The road was littered with abandoned cars' doors hanging open, belongings scattered like people vanished mid-breath. A child's shoe, a half-melted ice chest, a Bible lying face down in the dirt. I kept moving. The farther I walked, the more I noticed the signs. Claw marks on metal, shattered glass, dark stains dried into the concrete. Whatever hunted at night, it had been here, and it wasn't done. Around noon, the radio crackled to life, a broken voice pushing through static. If you can hear this, avoid the highways. They're moving north. Repeat. They're moving north. Then silence. I stopped walking. North. That was the direction I was heading. A chill crawled up my spine, even under the daylight. I tightened my pack, adjusted the strap digging into my shoulder, and forced myself forward. Because out here, the road doesn't care if you're tired. The road doesn't care if you're scared. The road only asks one thing: keep moving. And so I did. 15 miles! My legs felt like wet sandbags, but stopping wasn't an option. The road ahead was a graveyard of metal cars jammed bumper to bumper, stretching so far down the highway they looked like a rusted spine disappearing into the horizon. Doors hung open, windows smashed. Some cars still had their blinkers clicking, long dead, but frozen mid-signal, like they were trying to warn me even now. I moved slow, careful, peeking into each one. A half-empty water bottle, a torn jacket, a phone with the screen cracked like a spider web. Nothing useful, nothing that would keep me alive tonight. The sun was sliding west, bleeding gold across the sky. PM 3 hours until the shadows got long, 4 until the first scream. I checked another Cara minivan with stickers on the back window. Soccer, honor roll. A family that never made it home. Inside, the seats were shredded, not cut, not torn by hands. Clawed, deep grooves, 4 at a time, like something had raked through the fabric with hunger. My breath caught. I backed away, scanning the tree line, the rooftops, the ditches. Nothing moved, but the silence felt wrong, too thick, too heavy, like the world was holding its breath. I kept walking. Every few steps I glanced at the sun, judging how much time I had left. Not enough, never enough. Then I saw it, a shape up ahead, half buried behind a pickup truck, a building, small, concrete, windows barred, a storm shelter or maybe an old utility station, if the door wasn't locked, if the inside wasn't already occupied. It could save my life. I tightened my grip on my pack and picked up my pace. The shadows were already stretching across the road like fingers. I needed walls, a door, a roof, anything between me and the things that crawled out after dark. And I needed it now. The concrete building looked small from a distance. Up close, it felt wrong. The walls were stained with old rainwater, streaked like something had dragged its fingers down the sides. The barred windows were dark, no movement inside, no sound, just a square of shadow sitting in the middle of the dead road. I approached slow, every step measured. The air felt heavier here, like the world was warning me to turn back. The metal door was dented, but intact. A faded sign hung crooked above it: Emergency Storm Refuge County, USC only. I pressed my ear to the door. Nothing. No breathing. No shuffling. No scratching. Just silence. I tried the handle. It didn't move. My heart sank until I noticed the lock. It wasn't broken. It wasn't jammed. It was open. Someone had unlocked it from the inside. I pushed the door slowly, letting the hinges groan just enough to announce me. A stale, cold draft rolled out, carrying the smell of dust metal. And something else, something faint, something like old sweat and fear. I stepped inside. The door closed behind me with a heavy thud. The room was small, maybe 20 feet across, concrete walls, a metal bench bolted to the floor, a single emergency light flickering weakly, powered by a dying battery, and in the corner, a pile of blankets, a backpack, a pair of boots. Someone had been here. Recently. I crouched, checking the pack, inside. A half-eaten protein bar, a cracked flashlight, a map with circles drawn around several towns, and a notebook, pages torn out except for one. I lifted the remaining page. The handwriting was frantic, jagged, written by someone whose hands wouldn't stop shaking. If you're reading this, don't stay after dark. They know this place. They wait for the lights to die. My stomach tightened. The emergency light above me flickered again, longer this time. A warning, a countdown. I looked at the door, at the barred windows, at the deep scratches on the inside of the metal frame. This place wasn't a shelter, it was a trap, and the sun outside was already sinking. The emergency light flickered again, a long, dying pulse that washed the room in sickly orange before fading back to a trembling glow. I didn't trust it to last another minute. I scanned the shelter again, slower this time, forcing myself to look past the obvious: concrete walls, metal bench, blankets, boots, backpack, nothing else. But the note. They wait for the lights to die. That meant whoever wrote it had been here long enough to learn the pattern, long enough to know this place wasn't safe. I stepped back, letting my boots scrape across the floor, and that's when I heard it. A hollow sound, a different tone beneath the concrete. I froze, shifted my weight, pressed my heel down again. Thump, not solid, not uniform. Something was beneath the floor. I dropped to my knees and brushed away the dust. The concrete wasn't one piece, there were faint seams, almost invisible unless you were looking for them. A square, maybe 3 feet across. A hatch. My pulse kicked hard in my throat. I hooked my fingers into the seam and pulled. Nothing. I tried again, harder. Still nothing. Then I noticed the metal bench bolted to the floor, but not centered. It sat slightly off to the side, like someone had dragged it once, or like it had been used as leverage. I wedged my shoulder under the edge of the bench and pushed with everything I had. The bolts groaned, the floor vibrated, dust rained from the ceiling, and then the hatch shifted, just an inch, but enough. I grabbed the edge and pulled it open. A cold draft rose from the darkness below, carrying the smell of damp earth. And something older, something untouched by sunlight for a long, long time. A ladder descended into the black metal rungs, rusty but intact. I leaned closer. There was a sound down there, not movement, not breathing, a hum, low, steady, mechanical. Something was running underground. A generator? A bunker? A tunnel system? Or something worse? The emergency light above me flickered again, this time sputtering like a candle in the wind. I didn't have a choice. Stay up here and wait for the dark, or go down into whatever waited below. I gripped the ladder. The metal was cold enough to bite, and I began to climb. The hatch groaned above me as I climbed down, each rung older than the last. Halfway into the tunnel, the emergency light from the shelter flickered one final time, and died. Darkness swallowed the room above. Then slam! The hatch crashed shut with a violence that shook the ladder. Dust rained down. Metal screamed against metal as the lock snapped into place. I froze, gripping the rung, heart hammering. Something had closed it, or something had waited for me to go down before sealing me in. But the tunnel wasn't pitch black. A faint glow pulsed ahead, a thin strip of light leaking from beneath a steel door at the bottom of the ladder. Not rusted, not broken, unlocked. I reached the ground and pressed my hand against it. Solid, thick, reinforced. A lock hung on the inside latch, a lock meant to keep something out, not in. For the first time since the sky went black, I felt a flicker of relief. A safe place, a real one, a door I could control. I slipped inside and shut it behind me, sliding the heavy lock into place. The click echoed like salvation. The room was small, barely bigger than a storage closet, but it had walls, a ceiling, and a single battery lantern sitting on a crate. I switched it on. Warm yellow light filled the space. I exhaled for the first time in hours. I sat down, leaning against the wall, letting the tension bleed out of my shoulders. My eyes drifted shut. Then the sounds began. At first, distant, barely there. A low moan, a dragging scrape, a soft, rhythmic tapping. Then louder, closer, scratching, pounding, something dragging its weight along the tunnel floor. The steel door shuddered once, just once, like something pressed its face against it. Listening, I held my breath. The pounding grew harder, more frantic, as if whatever was out there had followed my scent down the ladder. But the door held, the lock held. I was safe, for now. The lantern flickered, casting long shadows across the walls. I pulled my knees to my chest and waited for the noises to fade. They didn't. They just circled, scraped, moaned, hunting, searching, learning, and somewhere in the dark tunnel beyond that steel door, something screamed. When the pounding finally stopped, when the scratching faded into the long, empty breaths of the tunnel, my body gave out. I didn't mean to sleep. I didn't even remember closing my eyes. One moment I was staring at the lantern's trembling glow, the next everything went black. I woke to silence, warm, light, real sunlight spilled through the cracks around the steel door. For a second I didn't know where I was. My head throbbed, my mouth felt like sand. Then it hit me, the tunnel, the door, the things outside. I sat up fast, heart pounding, but the world didn't shake this time. No moaning, no claws dragging along the concrete, no whisper calling my name. Just quiet. I checked the lantern, dead. I must have slept through the whole night and half the day. Noon. I'd slept almost 12 hours. My body must have needed it more than I realized. I unlatched the steel door and stepped into the tunnel. The air was cool, carrying the faint smell of earth and rust, but the danger was gone. Whatever hunted me last night had moved on. The ladder was still there. The hatch above still shut tight. I climbed up, pushed it open, and sunlight poured over me like a blessing. The shelter was empty, quiet, safe at least in the daylight. I grabbed my pack, tightened the straps, and stepped back onto the road. 15 miles behind me. A whole world ahead. Maybe things would get better. Maybe they wouldn't, but I was alive. And as long as I kept moving, there was still a chance, a small one, that I'd find something out here worth surviving for. I took a breath, felt the sun on my face, and started walking again. Hope was a fragile thing in this world. But it was all I had left. The road stretched ahead in a long, shimmering ribbon of heat. Noon sun beat down on the cracked asphalt, turning the world into a wavering mirage. I kept walking, one foot in front of the other, the weight of the night still clinging to my bones. Then I saw it. At first, just a speck, a dark smudge on the horizon, barely visible through the rising heat. I squinted, wiped the sweat from my brow, and looked again. It wasn't a car, wasn't a tree, wasn't debris. It was standing, a figure, still, motionless, facing me. My heart tightened. I slowed my pace, instinct kicking in. People were rare now, too rare. And the ones you did find, they weren't always people anymore. The figure didn't move. I took a few more steps, cautious, hand drifting toward the knife at my belt. The heat haze rippled, distorting the shape, making it look almost inhuman for a moment. Then the wind shifted. A faint sound carried across the empty road. Not a growl, not a moan, not the clicking chatter the creatures made when they hunted. A voice, a single word. "Hey!" I froze. The figure lifted an arm, slow, deliberate, and waved. Not a threat, not a lure. A signal, a human signal. I swallowed hard, adrenaline buzzing through my veins. Hope was dangerous. Hope got people killed. But the figure didn't move closer, didn't rush me, didn't call again, just stood there, waiting. I stepped forward, then another, then another. The distance between us shrank, the shape sharpened. A person, definitely a person, wearing a long coat, carrying a pack, face hidden beneath a hood. When I was close enough to see the outline of their eyes beneath the shadow, they spoke again. Voice rough, tired, but unmistakably human. "You're headed the wrong way." The wind died. The world went still. I stared at them, unsure whether to run, fight, or listen. They lifted a hand and pointed behind me back toward the shelter, the tunnel, the road I'd just escaped. "They're circling. You don't want to be out here tonight." My stomach dropped. The figure lowered their hand, stepped back, and nodded toward the distant hills. "We will be safe there." I kept a safe distance behind him, far enough that I could run if I had to, close enough that I wouldn't lose him in the heat haze. The stranger walked with a steady, practiced pace, like someone who'd been surviving out here long before I ever stepped onto this road. I cleared my throat, kept my voice calm. "What's your name?" He didn't turn, didn't slow, just said, low and rough, "Call me Red." Everyone did, back when the world was different. Red. The name fit him. The long coat, the dust-stained hood, the way he moved like a man who'd seen too much and survived anyway. He glanced back at me, eyes shadowed but sharp. "I know you've got questions. Maybe. I can answer some." So I asked the one that had been eating at me since the first night, "What are those things that hunt after dark?" "The ones I can't see, only hear." Red stopped walking. His shoulders tightened. His head dipped. When he looked at me, there was fear in his eyes, the kind that comes from knowing the truth too well. "They call them Nephilim." The word hit me like a cold wind. I swallowed. How were they released? How did they come back? Red shook his head slowly. "I don't know. Nobody does. But they're dangerous, more dangerous than anything left walking." We stood there for a moment, the road stretching empty in both directions, the sun burning overhead. I finally said, "You can call me Mac. I've been running for days." Red gave a tired, knowing nod. "Me too." Then he stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Listen, Mac, alone, we die. Together, maybe we stand a chance. 10 miles ahead, there's an old army base, Fort Jackson. We can make it before dark if we keep moving. Fort Jackson. A real place. A real shelter. Maybe even food." For the first time in days, I felt something warm flicker in my chest. Hope. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "I hope there's food there." Red actually smiled, a small, tired, human smile. "If there isn't, we'll find some. But first, we survive the night." He turned toward the distant hills, the outline of old military towers barely visible through the heat. I followed, two survivors. One road, 10 miles to safety, and the Nephilim waiting for the sun to fall. The gates of Fort Jackson rose out of the dust like the ribs of some giant skeleton, fences torn, guard towers empty. But the place was still standing, and in this world that counted as a miracle. The sun beat down, casting long, distorted shadows that danced with the swirling sand. Every creak of metal, every rustle of debris sent a jolt of adrenaline through us. This place, once a symbol of order and strength, was now a monument to a forgotten world. Me and Red slipped through a gap in the fence, moving slow, checking corners, listening for anything that breathed wrong. The silence was unnerving, a heavy blanket that muffled our footsteps and amplified our own ragged breaths. We moved like ghosts in a graveyard, our eyes scanning every shadow, every broken window. But the base was silent. No people, no movement, just the wind pushing sand across the concrete, whispering forgotten names, for once. Luck was on our side. The air, though thick with dust, felt lighter here, a temporary reprieve. Inside the mess hall, we found canned food stacked behind a fallen shelf, dusty, dented, but real, enough to keep us alive a few more days. The labels were faded, the contents a mystery, but the promise of sustenance was a luxury. We carefully packed what we could, the metallic clinking echoing in the vast empty space. The armory was half looted, but a few rifles and boxes of ammo were still there. I picked one up, feeling the weight settle into my hands. The cold steel was a familiar comfort, a reminder of a world that once was. It felt good to have something substantial, something that could offer defense. "I don't know if these will work on those things," I said quietly, my voice barely a whisper. The things were an unspoken terror, a constant shadow in our minds. Red nodded, his gaze distant. "Probably won't, but it's better than empty hands." He was right. Even false comfort was still comfort. In this new world, any advantage, however small, was worth clinging to. We secured a small barracks room, one entrance, thick walls, cots still intact. It didn't take long to make it safe. We barricaded the door with a fallen locker, checked the vents for any hidden passages, swept the corners for unwelcome guests. The simple act of securing a space, making it our own, brought a profound sense of relief. For the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe. The tension in my shoulders began to ease, replaced by a weary exhaustion. The constant vigilance had taken its toll, and the thought of a few hours of undisturbed rest was almost overwhelming. Red sat down on a cot, reached into his pack, and pulled out a bottle of gin. He held it up with a tired smile, the amber liquid glinting in the dim light filtering through the grimy window. "Figured we earned a drink." We passed the bottle back and forth, the burn warming our chests, loosening the knots in our shoulders. Each sip was a small act of defiance against the desolation, a fleeting moment of normalcy. The gin tasted like survival, like a brief escape from the harsh reality. After a while, Red stared at the floor, his voice low, almost lost in the vastness of the room. "I used to be General Carl Peterson," he said. "My base in Texas was overrun. My family. They didn't make it." His voice cracked just once, but it was enough to show the weight he carried, a burden heavier than any weapon. The silence that followed was thick with unspoken grief, a shared understanding of loss that transcended words. "I lost everything in a single night," he whispered. "I've been running ever since. I didn't know what to say. Words felt too small for that kind of pain. So I just nodded and said, 'I'm so sorry for your loss.'" My voice was hoarse, a reflection of the empathy that tightened my throat. Red wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, trying to pull himself together. He took a deep, shuddering breath, the gin doing little to dull the sharp edges of his memories. "We'll check the rest of the base tomorrow," he said, his voice regaining a hint of its former military resolve. "See what's left, maybe find a generator, maybe find answers." The hope in his words was fragile, but it was there, a flicker in the overwhelming darkness. He leaned back on the cot, staring at the ceiling, his eyes tracing the cracks in the plaster. "Tonight." We rest outside. The sun dipped behind the hills, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The shadows stretched long across the base, swallowing the ruins whole. Somewhere far off, something howled low, distant, hungry, a chilling reminder that the world outside was still terror, but inside Fort Jackson, behind thick walls and a locked door, we were safe for now. The silence of the barracks room was a fragile peace, a brief respite before the inevitable dawn and the renewed struggle for survival. We knew it wouldn't last forever, but for this one night it was enough.
Night fell over Fort Jackson like a curtain of ink. Me and Red sat in the dim barracks, the soft glow of a lantern pushing back just enough darkness to feel human. Outside, the base came alive with the sounds we feared most, scratching along the fences, soft, wet moaning drifting across the yard, something heavy brushing against the outer walls, testing them. But the barriers held, and for once we were on the safe side. Red sat on his cot, cleaning a rifle he knew wouldn't help against the Nephilim, but the ritual seemed to calm him. I sat across from him, chewing on a stale cracker, trying not to think about the shadows moving outside. Then the radio crackled, not static, not the usual. Broken emergency tones. Red and I froze. The radio hissed, then the message came through. Attention survivors. This is a national emergency broadcast. A defense has been discovered against the entities roaming the earth. Repeated defense exists. My heart slammed against my ribs. Red leaned forward, eyes wide, the fear in them replaced by something I hadn't seen since the world fell apart. The broadcast continued, the voice trembling with emotion. A safe zone has been established. Coordinates will repeat. All survivors are urged to travel there immediately. You are not alone. Static swallowed the rest. The room went silent except for the distant pounding on the base walls. I looked at Red. He looked at me. For the first time since we met, he didn't look like a man running from death. He looked like a man running toward something. He exhaled slowly. Mac. If that broadcast is real, it changes everything. I nodded, gripping the edge of my cot. Yeah. It means there's still a chance. Red stood, pacing once, twice, then stopping at the window to stare into the darkness. We leave at dawn, he said. No matter what. Outside, something slammed against the fence hard enough to rattle the metal. But inside, in that small barracks room with a dying lantern and a radio that had just whispered hope into the world. Safe enough to believe tomorrow might actually matter. The night at Fort Jackson felt too quiet. Me and Red had planned to leave at dawn, follow the broadcast, chase the hope we'd almost forgotten how to feel. But something in the air felt wrong, heavy, charged, like the world was holding its breath. Red sat near the window, watching the horizon. Sun's not up yet, he whispered. Stay alert. I nodded, tightening my grip on the rifle, even though we both knew it wouldn't do much. The lantern flickered, shadows stretching across the barracks walls. Then the sound came, a faint tremor, a soft vibration through the floor. Like footsteps. But too many, too fast, too coordinated. Red stood instantly. They're here. The first impact hit the outer fence, a deep, echoing thud that rattled the windows. Another followed, then another. The Nephilim weren't waiting for darkness this time. They were early. Red moved to the door, checking the barricade. They're testing the base, he said quietly. They know we're inside. A long, low sound rolled across the yard, not a scream, not a roar, but something in between. A signal, a call. The fence shuddered again. I stepped beside Red. What do we do? He didn't answer right away. He looked at the ceiling, the walls, the door, calculating, listening, thinking like a soldier again. Finally, he said, we hold until sunrise. If we can make it to daylight, they'll pull back. The pounding grew louder, faster, more focused. Something struck the gate hard enough to bend the metal. Another hit followed, shaking dust from the rafters. Red grabbed my shoulder. Mac, stay close. Don't panic. The lantern flickered again, dimming for a heartbeat before steadying. Outside, the Nephilim circled the base silent one moment, rushing the walls the next. Their movements were quick, unpredictable, like shadows trying to tear their way inside. Red took a deep breath. They're not breaking through yet. That buys us time. I swallowed hard. How much time? He didn't answer. Instead, he looked toward the faintest hint of color on the horizon, the first suggestion of dawn. If we're lucky, he said softly, just enough. The pounding continued. The walls trembled. The sky slowly brightened. And me and Red stood shoulder to shoulder, waiting for the moment the sun would save us, or the moment the Nephilim would break through. The night inside Fort Jackson felt heavier than usual, like the darkness itself was leaning against the walls, listening. Me and Red were sitting in the dim barracks, the lantern flickering low, when the radio crackled again. Not a soft crackle, a violent one, like someone was shaking the signal awake. Red froze mid-sentence. Mac, that's the same frequency as before. The static rose, dipped, then rose again, a pattern, almost rhythmic, like someone was fighting through interference. Then the voice came through, not calm like last time, not steady. This voice was terrified. Attention survivors. Repeat. Attention survivors. The message broke apart in fragments. Safe zone still active. Limited defenses. Nephilim adapting. Spreading faster. My stomach dropped. Red's eyes widened not in fear, but in recognition. Like he'd heard something like this before. The voice grew louder, desperate, like the operator was shouting into the mic. Coordinates updated. Previous location compromised. New safe zone established at. The transmission cut out. A harsh burst of static filled the room. Then the voice returned, trembling. If you can hear this, do not stay in one place. They are learning. They are hunting in patterns now. Red whispered patterns. That means intelligence. Before I could respond, something slammed into the outer gate hard enough to rattle the metal frame of the barracks. Another hit, then another, then scraping, pacing, testing. The Nephilim were still out there, still hungry, still evolving. The radio hissed again. The defense works. But only at close range. You must reach the safe zone to receive it. Repeat, you must reach the safe zone. A final crash echoed outside, closer this time. Then the last line came through, clear as a blade. This is humanity's last chance. The radio went dead. Silence, except for the pounding outside, louder now, more focused. Like the Nephilim had heard the broadcast too, and didn't like it. Red stood slowly, slinging his rifle over his shoulder. Mac. We leave at first light. No hesitation. I nodded, heart racing. Yeah, we move. The first faint glow of dawn crept over the horizon. The Nephilim shrieked a sound of frustration, rage, hunger. Red tightened his pack. Let's go. And as the sun finally broke over the hills, me and Red stepped out of Fort Jackson, toward the new coordinates, toward the last hope humanity had left.